please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 special coming to you from the Salubrious Gardens here in Rajpath. We're just a stone thrown away from the Parliament, and the reason why I'm here today is because I want to discuss a new book that has just hit the stands, or about to hit the stands. I've managed to get myself an advance copy. It says 7 Decades of Independent India, Ideas and Reflections. This book has managed to bring a lot of individuals, eminent individuals, on a single platform with their thoughts exploring different aspects of India. And joining me now are the 2 key editors of this book. On my extreme right is one of India's most intrepid civil servants, Mr. Vinod Rai, and on my immediate right is Mr. Undisputed Pilot. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and good to have you here on CNBC TV18. Mr. Rai, let's get on with some of the issues that you've talked about, in this book. And institutions clearly seems to be one running thread that I've found different authors exploring in different ways. And, the opening chapter that both of you have together written, you've said that providing effective governance and building efficient institutions were some of the major public policy challenges as India became a sovereign republic. Many would say in the last 70 years, we've managed to create robust, effective institutions, but many of them are now beginning to show signs of decay. We have a dysfunctional parliament. There are questions being raised about the judiciary. Many of the questions are being raised from within the judiciary. Leading investigation agencies are sort of being seen as listening to their political masters, so to speak. Are our institutions showing signs of decay, Mr. Rai?
See, that is exactly the signs of a robust, healthy, vibrant democracy, where you are able to question the institutions that the citizens constitute. See, the issues are this. Institutions, after they are created, they take a period of time to mature and then get sufficiently empowered to be able to deliver on the track that they are expected to deliver. Now, what happens in these institutions, you've seen the Election Commission perform to the T whenever the issue required, the Election Commission would step in. And if political parties are scared of anything or cautious about anything, it's not so much the court or anybody else, but it's the Election Commission. Similarly, the Supreme Court, when things they found were going slightly out of the way, Supreme Court would come and set down the parallel lines between the institutions. So at the point when it is required, these institutions have delivered. Yes, there are questions that you are raising. There are people in public who want to ask questions of them. And I think it's a very good sign, because in the last decade, what has happened is that the citizen has come center stage.
Okay.
He is seeking transparency, he is seeking accountability, and that's why he is questioning this.
It's interesting you talked about the Election Commission, sir, because today, they are also in the midst of a different kind of controversy. But Mr. Amitabh Palit, in the chapter that Sumit Ganguly has written, and he's very seductively named that chapter, Will India Ever Be a Great Power, where he says, and pretty much echoing what Mr. Rai is saying, that owing to a complex array of factors, virtually every political institution has witnessed a decline both in its probity and efficacy. How then do we rejuvenate, revitalize some of our core institutions?
I think all in all, the question has been about the capacity to deliver. I think that's the theme question that we try to address, and what the authors try to address in all the chapters, be it domestic policy, social sector, economic policy, even external policy. The ability of Indian institutions to deliver in terms of their capacity, in terms of their efficiency. I think that's what is eventually going to distinguish India from its peer countries in a very large respect. And that's what is also central to some of the questions that we pose in this book. Has democracy delivered? When is India likely to become an economic powerhouse? What will it take to raise the living standards of the people to that of the developed world? I think that's where it comes down to, in a very basic sense. And to an extent, I don't think we will be audacious enough to claim that we have answered this question. But at least we have tried, in terms of the team of authors that we have here, to point out where are the areas where the institutions have delivered, where are the areas they could have done much more, and where are the areas where they actually haven't been able to deliver.
And compared to the institutions in our neighboring countries, many would say India is far ahead from the rest. Before I go back to Mr. Rai, Mr. Pala, let me, because I could sense the frustration in the article that both of you have written about, about the fact that, you've said that India, at the stroke of, midnight, we gave our people the freedom of religion, freedom to, freedom of expression, but economic freedom remained elusive for the longest time. Now that it's been 27, 28 years since we took those bold reforms, many would say under duress, But having taken those steps, do you feel somewhere the pre-1991 mindset still continues to frustrate some of the free marketers like yourself? I don't know.
You know, in a sense, I think Mr. Rai and I have seen that particular generation of transition. When from the sort of 1991, there was a change in the mindset, activities changed, policies changed, but mindset change is a far more fundamental change. So I think a number of times you do get on to acting with the policies without heart and mind into the policies, and which is not really a result of conviction, but also a result of habits and attitudes. I think these are coming in slowly. There are a number of areas, and I think the biggest change that in India that we see now is that creativity is getting commercial expressions in far more vibrant and robust ways than it used to earlier. And I think that is also a result of the mindset, because earlier creativity and commerce were very distinct and mutually exclusive. But now they are no more. So I think that reflects a change of mindset, and probably coming along the embedding of marketing and institutions together.
Interesting points there, Mr. Rai, because one area where where not enough liberalization or reforms may have taken place, something that you've highlighted also is in the banking sphere. You've spoken that many of the state-run banks are in their own crisis of existence, and you were speaking, of course, in the context of NPAs. Interestingly, you've said that there has been political reluctance for decades to reform banks. Why the political reluctance? A. B, what kind of reforms are you talking about? Because many would say there has been some kind of reform that we've seen in the recent past. So what is it specifically that you have in mind?
See, the first reform is why I talked about reluctance is 50 years of public sector banking we've done after the first nationalization of the banks. Now, it's a mindset which has been created over a 50-year period. It's not overnight that you can change that mindset. You just talked about mindset with Amitendu. See, mindset changes take a longer period of time than systemic changes, structural changes. These can come about faster, but once you change a mindset, it takes long to go back. So in this particular case, it's a question of a mindset change. We believe that only public sector banks can deliver. Yes, they have delivered, there's no doubt about that. In fact, I believe that the infrastructure that has been created in this country, roads, railroads, what's it called, ports, airports, powerhouses, telecom, etc., because public sector banks have lent to these sectors. But the issue is, public sector banks also must be nimble-footed. They will have to change with times. Systems have changed, models of governance and lending have changed, IT platforms have come into force. We have to remain nimble-footed, and that's where we talk about the elephant learning to dance. So it will have to change when the government itself has made its intention known by saying that in the IDBI bank they'll draw down equity below 50%. So that is the harbinger of change that we are talking about.
Okay, elephant learning how to dance, that's a phrase that perhaps we're going to hear more of in the coming days. But Mr. Rai, considering the fact that you've said that how 2014 politically marked a watershed year, which was, after 30 years, one single party had the kind of majority that it did. You mentioned demonetization, GST, and some of the reforms that they've carried out. In that context, are you a bit disappointed that not enough has been done with banking? Yes, they have announced, IBC, they have announced, bank recap plan, but still, when it came to privatization, the government has now said that is not the plan. We will instead opt for consolidation, which many are wondering, is that even something novel? How would you?
See, that's what I call a mindset change. You cannot change these things overnight. What are you doing when you are changing the models of governance in public sector banks or privatizing public sector banks? You are playing with the monies of people. You can't afford to make a mistake. You can't afford to have people lose trust in their banks. So anything that you do has to be time-tested, has to be cautious, has to be prudential, and you have to ensure that it will actually deliver for the purpose of what your objective is. Now that's why I wouldn't want the reforms to be overnight. What I would say is, well, you're talking about consolidation, fine. Now there are models of consolidation. Do you merge two large banks and create a larger entity, or do you merge a small bank with a large bank to kill the smaller bank? Now there are 2-3 models that we have which are...
But what are you leaning more towards? More consolidation or more privatization? Since you bring up Indira Gandhi, 1969, how in one stroke 14 banks were nationalized. Hence, I'm asking you, what are you leaning more towards?
See, consolidation is something which is a must, which will have to come about. There are no two ways about it. You can't have 24 banks owned by government and with government providing them capital every other day to improve their technology, improve their credit appraisal systems, improve the HR systems, etc. So consolidation will have to come about. It's an inevitability. It has to come about. The other thing you talked about, privatization. Yes, over a period of time, government will have to draw down its equity. Otherwise, what will happen is, see, whether it's 51% or it's 26%, the difference is very minimal because banks require capital to grow. Capital is required in the country to build, among other things, infrastructure and other things. I mean, the estimate is about 15 lakh crores will be required. 1.5 trillion rupees will be required. Now, that kind of lending the banks can't do with the capital that the government can provide it, the capital adequacy. So, some point of time, we will have to draw down on capital. We will have or equity of the government. Right. So, but it will be a process. It will take a while. Today, with the kind of capital, and I think government announcing 2.11 lakh crores is a substantial amount that they have announced. For the next 2 or 3 years, they can take care of it.
I'll come back to some of these issues, but Mr. Palit, come in on that because many would say that, and which has also been an endeavor, and I could see that sort of a thread in different articles that were written by some of the contributors about how India continues still to be a very over-regulated market. And when you speak about the banks, we had Montek Singh Ahluwalia on the channel very recently, and he said that why should these public sector banks be under the control of North Block? Is the Department of Financial Services increasingly becoming an anachronistic institution when it comes to controlling banks? Do you think that we should now start having conversations around these issues?
I think a conversation is very important, but having said that, look, as a student of economics and a student of the Indian economy, I think we have grown up with the idea, and I'm not prepared to believe that that was a wrong idea, that banks do have a social obligation to fulfill. If we are talking about financial inclusion, then as agents of that financial inclusion, we cannot leave out banks. Now, if that is the role that banks are to fulfill, at least to an extent of their agenda, then I'm not too sure whether markets are the right processes to fulfill those agenda as well as at the same time address other needs of the requirement. We are seeing
priority sector lending is what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Even the startups, even let us say women entrepreneurs, even let us say industries in backward areas of the country with which there have been ample number of experiments. Look, I think this is where when we see the examples of emerging markets in recent years, including the developed countries, we really can't overlook the fact that it is only after having achieved a certain degree of social and economic level of prosperity and well-being, can one allow the market to really become let loose to that extent. But beyond that, there are obviously going to be sections which will need help. And there the markets are not always capable of delivering the success. We can talk about effective regulators, we can talk about a larger umbrage, but I don't think we can totally ignore the fact that at one level, banks will definitely need a social obligation to perform.
Should the DFS pull back, North Block pull back from the affairs of public sector banks? That is something you've hinted at, but I want to ask you more specifically, is that something that one should seriously
I think government
about?
has made its intent very clear in this. See, in constituting the Banks Board Bureau, government has driven the thin edge of the wedge in, which is in the PJ Naik committee report that you read, the BBB is a first step to creating a holding company to which the government will transfer its stakes, and the holding company will be a professionally run holding company. It will run the banks. So government, in principle, has taken a decision to distance itself. Now the issue is how long it will take. And that's
it's been over 2 years, sir, since this institution BBB came into being, and you have recently also talked about that there was a sense of frustration, I would imagine, that many of the recommendations you made were not accepted.
No, the frustration is, it's not the frustration. You see, what happens is, recommendations can work in an ideal kind of a situation, not when you have the kind of problems which are coming up out of the NPA system every other day. Banks had to go through the demonetization. Banks had to go through the GST, where they had to align themselves to the GST setup, and now every other day we have a problem in terms of the non-performing assets. It's the systems can work, the recommendations can work only after the cleanup has taken place. So as and when
So
we
first clean up,
have
and
to.
then
Otherwise, what will happen is you are just allowing the disease to go and infect the new systems that you will create. So the thing is that you have to take the call, clean up, cut your losses, and then reform. And when you reform in a system which is totally new, where your systems are new, but more importantly, where the HR, your human resources, are the new systems who know how to operate that new structure.
You know, before I come to public trust in institutions, I just want to end that conversation with you, Mr. Rai, because, you know, they've been, you know, specifically about the BBB and functioning, and since that becomes very important in the conversation about addressing some of the underlying issues with respect to the banking sector. Recently, over the last few days, you know, different quotations have been attributed to you with respect to your proposed meeting with the finance minister. Did it happen? Did it not happen? Now you've clarified, saying that you've met him several times. You know, one is a bit puzzled by the, you know, by different sort of quotes being attributed to you.
No, I tell you, this has nothing to do with what's written
fair
in the
enough,
book.
but
It's nothing to do with what's written in the book. But what has been brought out in the media is a letter which I wrote about 9 months back. Okay, and then after that, the finance minister has said, and so have I said, and you people, which means media, has seen me converse with the finance minister any number of times on various issues. So, I mean, in a 60-page compendium, if you pick up one sentence, that doesn't constitute the entire set of recommendations. So there will need to be no confusion about it. It's a question of a process, but nobody can expect either the government, the DFS or the BBB to deliver in 2 years' time. As I said first, that for something which is 50 years old, you can't overturn it and do it. If you do it in a hurry, it doesn't go. The reform is not sustainable. If you do it slowly, think over it, it becomes sustainable, and that's what we are aiming at.
Somewhere in the context of what he said, you know, to open a bank account 24 hours, 72 hours, but when it comes to actually siphoning or running away with funds, it's perhaps a matter of minutes. Do you feel somewhere when you know, looking back with your vast experience, Reserve Bank is now at that critical moment, and how it responds to this crisis will perhaps determine how people view this institution?
See, it's you must look into.
I called you the intrepid civil servant, Mr.
No,
Right? So I'm hoping that you would, give me an honest answer.
No, I'll
in
give you
terms
an
of
honest answer.
where does RBI stand today?
No, I'll tell you. You look at the most developed of systems today, most developed of systems, when I'm talking about monetary authorities or central banking systems. Okay, where at the click of a button on the mouse, millions have been transferred out of geographies. Okay, 1997, the so-called Asian tigers folded up. Our Reserve Bank, our central bank stood its ground and supported. Okay, nothing happened. When the monetary meltdown took place, the financial meltdown took place globally, US, Europe, much stronger institutions, much better regulated. Reserve Bank stood its ground, and it was robust. Indian financial systems were isolated from it. On the basis of one scam or two scams, you cannot fault a regulatory system or regulatory institution. I'll tell you why. You see, the most well-structured systems will fail if the humans operating them collude. Isn't it? Now, that's exactly what happened in US, that's exactly what happened in Europe.
Sure.
It's the man behind the machine which ultimately matters. And if you and I collude, then the best system structure that he creates is not going to function. And that's exactly what has happened in this.
Then do you empathize with Urjit Patel when he says RBI needs more powers to tackle issues like this?
It's not a question. No, it's not a question of empathy or anything. RBI today is sufficiently well architectured to be able to take care of any of these problems. What you require is a meeting of the minds of the financial authority and the monetary authority to be able to provide the reforms.
Architecturally, RBI is well endowed, but from a regulatory standpoint, I don't know whether it means the same thing or not, but because
from a regulatory standpoint, he has all the powers. Okay. What he said was, I should have the power to dismiss a CEO.
And that is where my earlier question, sir, about the powers of the Department of Financial Services comes
today, the appointing authority is the government.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Even when the holding company comes to be, RBI will not have the dismissing or the appointing authority. So the monetary authority in no country has the power to dismiss. They can recommend a dismissal, which they have done, and dismissals have taken place in government based on the recommendations of the RBI.
In conclusion, we have about 7-8 minutes left, and I want to talk about the other big elephant in the room, which is civil service and public service, public servants. And you again, both of you have been very candid about how public servants have been resistant to change. Many of these administrative reports have been gathering dust. If public servants themselves are not willing to change from within, what then? I mean, is now the onus on the elected officials to sort of put pressure on them to bring about that internal reform?
You just talked about the elephant learning to dance.
Elephant, I wanted to use that phrase, but I forgot. Elephant learning to
70 years of this elephant, it has a mindset. The mindset was a regulatory mindset. Okay. Now we are wanting that elephant to switch to a developmental facilitation mindset. It will change, and I can see the change. If you talk to people who are 40 years, 45 years, and that age, you can see the change in them. You can see the change in their thinking, and they are more attuned to facilitation than they are of regulation. Yes, 55 years plus, you may not, So times have come when the mindset is changing. I don't expect it to change in the next 2 years. But the very fact that India could jump from 130 positions to 100 positions in the ease of doing business says a lot, but we need to go 70 notches up at least. It just shows that the change is coming about. I think it's unfair for us to expect that the change will come about in 3 years' time. It will come about definitely, because all indications are in that direction. It's only a question of 2-3 years.
You actually preempted what I was going to ask you. So therefore, we need to be patient. Change is inevitable, but but it's been a long time coming. When Veerappa Moily first wrote the administration report, that was back in the 70s, sir.
No, that was recent. That was only in about 2006. But the first report was in 69.
In 69, but nothing really has happened. I mean, how much more patience?
Look, I think if you look at it in some other respect, this change has been forced onto the system. A, by technology, B, by a new generation. A new generation is actually no longer prepared to accept the fact that you have to run from pillar to post for doing that and whatnot, because they are very well prepared to get solutions online, which they have started getting. They are very well prepared to take the global market as their own market, which they have started acting on. So in such situations, I don't really think the civil service has really a very big role to either influence or prevent. But I think there are areas, like Mr. Rai was alluding to, when it comes to basic civil services, which really matter a lot for at least a third of the Indian population, which depend on subsidies, which depend on state support to ensure that things work properly and in an effective manner. I think this is where we still have a very, very long way to go. And the situation is obviously different in different parts of the country. But in sum total, there's a very long way to go. There are incredible success stories that come out of the grassroots, from the bureaucracy itself, positive mindset, selfless service. Otherwise, the country wouldn't have functioned.
Why that issue also becomes relevant, sir, is because, over the relationship between the elected officials and the bureaucracy. In the recent past, we've seen Aam Aadmi Party and the fight that they are having, unthinkable, with the Chief Secretary. You've come under some vicious attack by the Congress because of your role as the CAG. I mean, how does one tackle these things, and what does and what do these incidents tell us about the road ahead?
It means nothing. These are all signs of a vibrant democracy where everybody is questioning everybody else, and that's what I said when I said that the common man has come center stage today. He will want accountability from you. So if a political party is questioning the bureaucracy, or the bureaucracy is questioning the political party, it's good.
But how
there's healthy tension. What happens is they serve as checks and balances over the issue. Initially, there will be a lot of rub. Initially, there will be some negative energy coming out of it. But soon it coalesces into a cohesive whole, and it will start functioning, because both the parties involved realize that the step forward for both of them vis-a-vis the public will be to ensure that they show synergies.
You've given me the big picture, sir, but what about the civil servants who are actually caught in the middle of it? Like, for instance, in your case, when when there are accusations being made against you that you were the political tool of BJP and as in capacity of CAG, how do you then personally, at a personal level, at a big macro level, eventually things will get evened out. But at a personal level, I mean, how does one deal with it? And what would your message be to some of the other aspiring civil servants who may have seen the episode and would have found it rather disheartening?
Did it matter to me? In what way has it changed me? Nothing. There was a road ahead. You have to be sure about one thing, that you don't have an Achilles heel. You don't have a skeleton in your cupboard. And if you are robust on facts, you are sure about what you are going to be putting out into public domain, you have nothing to worry. It's all people will see, if you throw a stone at somebody, he's going to retaliate. So we were aware of that. So there are no two ways about it.
So you stand by whatever decisions you've taken in the past?
In the past, and not only so, I've seen green shoots all over the country where people are able to stand up and say, don't give me an illegal order. You want to give me an order? Give it to me in writing. See, in a parliamentary democracy, the political executive is always supreme. He has to give an instruction to the administrative executive in that sense, because he's accountable to the people. But that instruction has to be within the confines of legality, propriety. And if it's other than that, the bureaucrat is saying, please give it to me in writing. So I think good things are coming about, and I can see those green shoots all over the country.
And then this, maybe you could go first, maybe with a personal anecdote of your, looking back, at your sort of illustrious career. I mean, was it at all difficult the last few months, especially suddenly, because civil servants are said to be impervious, immune from, from political, push and pull. But suddenly you became a political figure in that sense. I mean, how has it been? So end this giving me a sort of a personal anecdote on how you dealt with the last, whatever.
No, see, I believe...
Since the CBI court order or whatever.
Oh, I believed in doing what I was mandated to do and to doing it perfectly well. And I believed in doing it in the sense that accountability to myself, I was absolutely clear, my conscience was clear about it. And I stood by it. I knew that the moment you are picking on people, they are going to be picking back on you. I stood my ground, nothing much happened, things came into public domain, and time-tested methods were evolved, courts, this, that, etc. I don't think it has changed me in any way, and I don't think it has lessened the stature of the institutions also in any way.
Your message to young civil servants?
Stand by your own conscience. You will deliver, and you will deliver to the T.